Absolutely delighted now to be joined by Assistant Secretary William Brownfield from the Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs. Bill, welcome. Lovely to see you.
Thanks. I appreciate the opportunity as well.
Let's kick off. Tell us a little bit about the agency's work combating heroin.
Sure. My part of the Department of State, the Drugs and Law Enforcement Bureau, has been around for about 40 years. We started life as an international anti-narcotics operation, and we have expanded over the last 40 years to include other forms of transnational organized crime, and then in the last 15 years, for training and institution building, first for law enforcement and then for all rule of law institutions. What are we most confronting right now? You have just put your finger on it, and that is heroin.
Right.
And anyone who lives in any of the 50 states of the United States, plus the District of Columbia, is aware that we are confronting a heroin crisis in the United States today. We are the international side of the U.S. response. Who produces more than 80% of the world's heroin? Afghanistan.
Right.
We have a very large program in Afghanistan, and in fact it is larger than any other individual nation in the world, and it attempts to address demand, cultivation, production, trafficking, and money laundering in Afghanistan. And yet, in the United States of America, more than 90% of the heroin we consume here does not come from Afghanistan. It comes from our neighbor, immediate neighbor to the south, a mere 20 miles or so from where
Right.
we're seated, from Mexico. And our effort there, and it's a cooperative effort with good support and cooperation from the government of Mexico, is to manage that problem from Mexico. Something that is new for Mexico because it has a 40-year history of dealing with South American product that transits Mexico, but very little experience dealing with the actual cultivation and production of the product in Mexico. It's required a certain amount of creative approach by both the United States and Mexico, and my own view is we're making progress.
Well, that's great. Now, but what about dealing with cocaine? What progress have you made there?
Yep. When you and I were kids, say 40 years ago, cocaine was the crisis in the Western Hemisphere and certainly in the United States of America. And I remember well the 1980s when perhaps the most important social issue affecting the United States of America writ large everywhere was crack and the crack cocaine
Right.
crisis. Now, there's good news to this story. Over the last 10 years, the consumption of cocaine in the United States has dropped somewhere near 50%.
Right.
We're back at historically low levels in the United States. That is good news, and I think those who do both domestic and international law enforcement and anti-narcotic work should be very proud of that. However, watch out. In the last 2.5 years, the production of cocaine from Colombia,
Right.
our friend, our partner, our ally, a nation and a government that has made extraordinary sacrifices in addressing the cocaine issue and enjoyed extraordinary success. Over the course of 10 years, they drove down cocaine production in Colombia by more than 60%. That's 60%. But in the last 2.5 years, it has more than doubled. And historically, Colombian cocaine tends to go to market in the United States of America. That's our challenge, I suggest, for the next 5 years, how to ensure that we don't return to those days 30 years ago where cocaine was a challenge for the entire American community.
Talking about the community, how do you interact with local and state law enforcement?
May I tell you, one of my initiatives, if you will, something I feel very strongly about,
Sure.
for the last 5, going on 6 years that I have held this job as Assistant Secretary for Drugs and Law Enforcement, is establishing partnerships with U.S. state and local law enforcement. We started around 2010, 2011 with 0 partners. All of our partners were federal law enforcement,
Right.
which, by the way, is a good thing. I am a great fan of federal law enforcement.
Right.
I think they do a superb job. But one, they have a finite number of personnel available for international programs. And two, there are certain types of crime that they don't do. Federal law enforcement does not do domestic violence.
Right.
Federal law enforcement does not do crowd control and riot control. Federal law enforcement does not do, are you ready for this? Traffic control, which in some countries is an extraordinarily important issue.
Sure.
We need partners
Right.
at the state and local level. In the last 5 years, we have signed up formally more than 25 police partners, informally more than 80 police, district attorney and prosecutors and correction system partners. Why is this good? I like to say it is a win-win for both sides. What do we get? We get access to some of the finest trainers and some of the finest law enforcement institutions, not just in the United States, but in the world. There is no substitute for that. What do they get? First, they get credit, because I absolutely assure that any time they perform a mission for us, they get public acknowledgement and recognition. They also get valuable experience in dealing with some countries who have a direct impact on their own communities. Maybe it's gangs, maybe it's drug trafficking
Right.
organizations, whatever. If you were in the city of San Diego, you would have some interest, I suggest, in having your law enforcement have a relationship with, a Rolodex, to use a term from 20 years ago, with leaders in Mexican and Central American law enforcement.
Right.
They get that. They get valuable experience, and at times they're even able to deal with specific cases that they're trying to work back home that they can work while deployed overseas. At the end of the day, it is a winner, and may I suggest to any member of state or local law enforcement who might be listening, at the end of the day, I pay all of the freight. It is cost neutral for the participating partner, and I would suggest they get great value at no cost. It's something I'm proud of, and it's something I hope I can even expand on, perhaps during my time here at the IACP.
Well, thank you ever so much indeed for coming to talk to us today. Really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for the chance.